Okay, I'm feeling like it's 8:15. How about everybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming to the Whatcom County Public Utility District #1 regular meeting. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So let's move on to the agenda. Are there any modification or changes to the agenda?
I think we do have an executive John was saying we had an executive session, but it's not on this agenda.
Right.
Commissioner Deschmont had asked for an executive session for a performance review of the GM.
Well, we actually agreed to it at our last commission meeting.
We did. I mean, I was wondering if you would want to, do we want to do that today still? Like,
You guys are headed.
Were you ready for it? Okay, well, let's play it by ear.
yeah, just because I do have, because we do have, have to travel to Clark County tonight and
Okay.
have a kind of just some other responsibilities I got to get through in the day. I would.
Is that okay with everyone, you, Chris, John, if we do that next meeting?
Well,
The only limitation on next meeting is we intended to have a water right update, a little longer executive session on the adjudication with
Will you
outside
not be
counsel.
Okay, so how about the second meeting then?
that'd be fine by me.
Is that fine with all of us? Okay, can we make sure to get it on the agenda so all the commission knows? Cause like, I'm a little bit worried that if, when it's not on there, James wondering, well, I thought we agreed to, but then now it's on our wonderful tool suggested it not be on there. You know what I'm saying? Let's make sure we get it on there when it gets published.
Yeah,
So second meeting in May.
yeah, because so it should be on the agenda for the next meeting, yeah,
Okay,
or second meeting in May.
Got it.
Second meeting in May.
great.
Thank you.
That sounds good. Yeah, no problem. Putting that off on my Chris.
Then I move we approve the
Okay.
agenda as it is.
Okay,
I
with no executive session.
with no executive session, okay.
All right, there's a motion and a
Second
second.
the motion, yes.
And all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's go to the consent agenda. So we have the minutes of the regular meeting and the claims for April 22nd. Any comments or questions regarding the minutes or the claims?
Not for me. I move to approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion.
I second, yeah.
So is there further discussion? Do we get any questions?
No.
Okay. There's a motion, a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The motion passes. Let's move on to public comment. And we have people in the room
Public?
who are shaking their heads that they don't want to comment. Is anybody online who would like to comment? Good to see you, Nash. Okay, if there's no further comment, then we'll move on to the general manager's report. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. If I could indulge me a little bit here, I got a few things to update you on, and then I want to transition right into the strategic plan. So cover the strategic plan update now as part of my GM report. Just it flows better that way. So the first thing is went to the NWPPA E&O conference last week. That's where I was in Spokane. Engineering operations.
Okay.
And the theme of this one was storage. And the reason I wanted to go was it's been 10 years since I directly, worked with battery storage as, a leader in the industry, and things have changed. The world has evolved, and I didn't know how out of date my knowledge was. So this was a good opportunity to go. It turned out that 3 of the presentations were from my old team in Snohomish, and it was for them all about decommissioning the batteries and what that looked like at end of life and total life cycle costs and all of that. And we had put in plugs back in 2012 and 2013, and we did the grants for all of those projects. By plug, I mean an end of life cost that was a wild estimate. You know, we just took a look at it and said, well, it's gonna be 15 years. And here's what disposal is gonna look like, and here's what can be recycled. And we made an estimate based on that. And, turns out way off.
High, low?
Way low. And worse, the batteries themselves did not end up with the kind of life that, that we were hoping for at the time. The flow batteries were decommissioned about 3 months after I left, and they had just been commissioned about a year before I left. And they were decommissioned because they physically no longer worked.
And how long was the expectation?
25 years. Yeah.
So this is the story on just flow, but both flow and
Both.
lithium.
Yeah, so there were 2 utility scale lithium ion batteries. They were the largest ones installed in Washington state at the time. Today they would be considered tiny installations. They were 1 megawatt hour, half megawatt each. So they were lithium ion, and LG Chem was the vendor for the cells themselves. And
Big company.
yeah, and I can't remember who the battery management company was that put the cells in the container and did the balance on it. But the flow battery was, it was an interesting concept, bad execution, and the company that Uni Energy, the company that was behind it, it also went bankrupt in the process, so they're gone. So there's one other flow battery company that I'm aware of down in Hayward, California. They're still in business. They're selling flow batteries, so I think they've got it figured out. Uni Energy did not, and we can go into the why of it, but at the end of the day, we ended up buying batteries that had a couple thousand gallons of electrolyte in it, and then at the end of the day, Snohomish had to decommission that, and there was nobody that would take the electrolyte because it was so corrosive. And they ended up having to hire a specialty chemical disposal company, and then the electronics that there was supposed to be some residual value for, there was none. And that part of it was bad. On the lithium ion, the assumption was that there's going to be an industry that will evolve, and this was 10 years ago, to recycle the guts of these things. And the reality is there's a beginnings of an industry to recycle transportation batteries, but the utility scale batteries haven't hit the market yet. They're still all basically in service. This was one of the very first units that was pulled out of service. So nobody was willing to accept anything that came from a utility. And I think part of it was the publicity from the Moss Landing fires, the one in 2020 and then the one this year. Yeah, they had 2, they're both the same size. And so 2/3 of the Moss Landing battery installation burned to the ground in 2 different fire events. So that was, so people aren't willing to accept large utility scale remnants right now, even though I would argue it's the same cells that are in Teslas and Neos and all of the other batteries that are in transportation. Yeah, it's
I
really
never
kind of.
catch fire.
What's that?
Nothing.
We're murmuring to ourselves.
It just was, it was interesting though, in the fact that, anyway, so they had to essentially pay to have the batteries decommissioned. And so rather than netting out, some value at the end of life, they ended up paying a lot of money at the end of life. And so it really screwed up the life cycle cost analysis and made it, I guess the good news is the early installations were done on a grant basis, and they were experimental. And so the utilities weren't out, whether it was PUD or a Vista, that was the other flow battery one. They weren't out a lot of money because they didn't put up a lot of the capital in the first place. Now PUD, between the 3 batteries, the 2 flow and the lithium ions, they were out about, I want to say 12 million. For them, that was sustainable. And then they simply made the choice, if need be, we're just gonna write that off. And then they got about 20 million from the Fed and the state. So they ended up about a third matching. So it was an experiment. And at the end of the day, they got costs that were not, in my opinion, that informative. As more of these utility batteries hit the recycle market, there's going to be some kind of recycle market develop. And there will be some value stream that's established there. It's just not there yet. And it's, so I think the answer from that particular experiment was that, yes, if you have a recycling industry developed, you're gonna have some residual value of these things when they come out of service, but that day is not today. So that was, a couple of the presentations were around that.
Yeah.
One interesting thing, and we'll talk in a little bit more about this,
I'm deeply interested, but I don't wanna bore this commissioner with I would love to talk to you more about.
okay, well, and this is why it's engineering and operations, because all of us engineers and former, operating people, we.
But this is one thing about batteries, there is a lot of battery deployment happening still across the world. And obviously that battery technology is incorporating thermal management, which is really what this is about, to keep the fires from
I have
happening.
more to say about that.
Oh, okay.
So,
I just wanna make sure we didn't just put a total damper on batteries.
no. So one of the other presentations was by a vendor, but, not a vendor of battery cells. And, the issue was the frequency of utility scale failures. And if you'll recall, there've been the two at Moss Landing, there was another one in Arizona. There was another one in Southern California and so on and so forth. And if you time it out, the Moss Landing, failure was the only utility scale failure in the last 4 years in the world. So to your point, and it would, actually, I remember, it was in an insurance commissioner was making the presentation. His argument was that people on the insurance side are beginning to lump these things with the utility wildfire issue. And his pushback was, no, this is a completely separate issue, and it appears that they've got this fixed. That the battery management, the thermal management issues have been largely resolved. Lithium ion can still have thermal runaway and can still have combustion just because of the chemistry involved. Another presentation by a different insurance policy group, they were talking about different chemistry, and then there was a vendor that came in to talk about it. And the chemistry they were talking about was nickel hydrogen. So it's nickel H2, NiH2. And a couple of things about it. It's a little bit more expensive per megawatt hour than lithium ion. It's larger in terms of its footprint, about 2.5 times the footprint. So the units themselves are much bigger. The chemistry cannot burn. The other thing that they're finding is that the life cycle for lithium ion is somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000 cycles. I wrote the number here somewhere, and that's to get to 80% degradation in the cells. And in this nickel hydrogen chemistry, to get to 94% of original storage capacity is 30,000 cycles. And so the issue of whether or not to do storage, if you've decided you're going to do storage, then the question should be, what's the best chemical match for your use case? And what it came out was if it's 1 a day or less on the cycle, you can't beat lithium ion. And part of it is that, instead of 100 acres for the battery field for a gigawatt hour battery, you only need 35 acres. And so, if land is not cheap or relatively inexpensive, having this nickel hydrogen doesn't make sense. On the other hand, if you have like a dual peak, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon day for your utility, which we do not, our load's flat. But if you had that, then you'd probably be looking at either 1 charge and 2 discharge cycles, 50% discharge cycles, or you'd be looking at 2 charge and discharge cycles per day. And in that case, this nickel hydrogen chemistry was economically vastly superior. So it was interesting how these different chemistries are going to win out in different use cases. So, kind of pin that. I'm thinking that, there's the iron air, which you guys have maybe heard about, but that one consumes probably 10 times as much land as lithium ion. But from what I understand, you're also looking at infinite number of cycles for degradation. In other words, they last forever. So, it's one of those things where, it costs more, but depending on, and that requires slow cycle time. So discharge and charge over days. So it's more of a seasonal peak shifting kind of application. So it's interesting to me that these applications are gonna be driven by the chemistry over time. And that was kind of the aha moment for the whole conference for me, was going over that. And it appeared to me that if you've got a relatively large number of cycles you need to cover, that so the other measure that everybody always has, they say, okay, renewable plus storage versus combined cycle natural gas. And they do that on a cost basis. And right now, the combined cycle natural gas, with any reasonable forecast of the price of gas and a reasonable forecast of the cost of allowances, it's still cheaper than the renewable plus battery. This nickel hydrogen chemistry is probably the first one that'll edge that out and may make the renewable plus storage more cost effective than a current combined cycle. We're not there yet because this nickel hydrogen is early in the the cost decline curve that you expect to see. So today there's probably 10 of these things in service worldwide versus hundreds, if not thousands, of lithium ion utility scale. As that number grows and you get over 100, you'll get the economies of scale of production and a normal decline. Plus the chemistry itself is far cheaper than lithium ion.
Right.
You still have to get nickel, which comes from places that don't like us, but the rest of the chemistry works out just fine. So that was kind of an interesting piece. If anybody's interested, I got a ton more information on that. But the Energy Northwest was there. They did an SMR talk, and it was nothing new. So those of us that have attended the Energy Northwest, it was simply an update and explaining to people who weren't up to speed on it what triox fuel is and how it works. The black spheres, the graphite spheres. And it really didn't go into much more than that. And they had a carbon capture case from California. And it was really interesting. It only works if you have no dispatch. So it's got to be run as a baseload plant, 100% flat out. You can throttle it, but a little bit. There's no cost information on it yet, but their bogey they're looking for in California is that it has to be competitive with the last 10% of the decarbonization efforts, which you guys have seen those presentations. That's the most expensive piece. So the issue is if you can beat that, then this technology would be the way to go. And what they're doing is they're separating out the carbon dioxide and get about 95% out of the waste stream. And then they pump it into subterranean structures. And you're looking at parasitic loads are 15 to 25%. And the storage that they have, and it's up near the geysers in Central California. The site that they've selected where they're going to pipe the CO2 and then inject it in the underground structures, they figure has a 50-year storage potential, and it is about 12 square miles. So they're really not taking up a large piece of real estate. Now and of course the long term, they believe that it'll be turned into calcium carbonate and it won't enter the atmosphere again. Yes, sir.
So I'm interested in what these technologies might have relevance to us. So is there a way to integrate carbon capture and storage into geothermal?
Well, there's no carbon generated, there's nothing burned.
But could you sequester carbon in a geothermal
Well,
system?
you always can, and then that ends up simply looking like a parasitic load, and you've got to put it somewhere. So there's two technologies. One is a direct conversion to calcium carbonate, and so you end up with white powder.
I mean, I've been told there's lots of olivine on Mount Baker, and so olivine is a
So
good.
the second issue would be, do you inject it into the ground somewhere? And not knowing enough about the seismicity of the mountain yet.
I'm just when we're doing feasibility studies, I'm just curious if that's something that could be.
We haven't asked Hero to look at it. I would say kind of one thing at a time. If we get too many targets out there, we'll not hit any of them.
Yeah, agreed. The other question is on storage. Is there any potential for storage and anything we're talking about or exploring at the PUD? in Whatcom County. I mean, the things that occur to me is things that we've talked about, which is partnering with other utilities. As it relates to storage, for example, to allow greater electric vehicle charging, whether that's along the island ferry. Because there's insufficient supply current, to support that, or a Mount Baker, I'm sorry, our transit, Wacom Transit
You're
Authority.
not talking about carbon sequestration, you're
No, I'm
talking
switching back
about
to the storage,
avoidance.
yeah, I'm talking about storage now. Because you just also, we're talking about battery storage, is there anything that Wacom PD, could be looking at in terms of the application of any of these storage technologies?
Nothing struck me in the meetings, I'll have to think more about that.
Oh, just open question, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, nothing struck me as, oh, we wanna do that. It was more, here's a whole bunch of technology that's out there being developed outside of us.
Okay.
And I wanted to bring kind of a flavor of that back, because this was in many regards a very technical conference and not really focused on the policy questions, more of the, if you do this, here's what happens.
And that's why my eyes are glazing over.
Sorry about that.
But, it also seems like it's still risky, right? I mean, for a small PUD,
Oh, yeah.
it'd be, it felt like a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Even though I'm grateful for the innovators and risk takers
For
at
sure.
Snow PUD, but we're not there.
Well, and that's,
Yeah.
when I talk about targets, when you're a big organization, they tackle geothermal, they tackle storage, they tackle tidal all at the same time.
Yeah, we get to pick one.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I would just say, we're small, let's stay focused, and right now, we're pursuing geothermal, that's gonna take a while, and let's see how that develops before we move on to a different target. Let's see. The one other thing that was kind of, to me, kind of really, really interesting, and it came out in the very first roundtable, and that was the CEOs, and it turned out that SnowPUD, of all utilities, the largest of Bonneville's customers, the largest, they are going to load following. That actually was earth-shattering news. So, you're talking about an organization that has been in the market, they have trading desks, they tag their own loads, they do all of that
They're
stuff.
they're going to cheeseburger.
Yep, they're going back to, Bonneville and saying, you manage this for us, it's gonna reduce their market risk. That was kind of a bombshell. I
Is
think,
Bonneville happy about that or not happy about that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I would suspect they don't care.
Okay.
Because if somebody goes to load following, it's less in block and slice. So,
Can you explain what that means?
sure. When you take servers from Bonneville, you have a bunch of different options you have to make, and one of them, I'm gonna ask you guys for a head nod today. One of them is to let Bonneville manage your power procurement, and that's called load following, and they go ahead and you give them the forecast and the daily dispatch responsibilities. And they match it up and essentially bill you the difference for anything they've got to buy in the market. And basically the commitment is that as much as they can, they're gonna run you through tier 1 up to your high water mark and keep your costs down. And we have been load following since our foundation. And most small utilities are that way because then you don't have to trade in the market. The other two products that you can buy from Bonneville, again, tier 1, is a block, which is just 10 megawatts of power, 24 hours a day for an entire year. In the next, so that's a block. Or it could be, 7 or 8 hours of power during 3 summer months, and here's what that looks like. So those are blocks. And then the other product they sell is called a slice, where whatever it is that the Columbia River system is doing, you get a percentage. So if it's high, you get a lot. If it's low, you don't get much. And then if you're a slice customer and the river's down, then the question is, do you allow Bonneville to fill in on tier 3, or do you have a market operation that you have your own brokers and you contact third parties and do your own procurement? SnowPUD did that. They had block and slice from Bonneville, but they were not load following, and they had an entire procurement desk that dealt with buying the balance of their market power, and they did a good job of that. They decided to stop doing that. So that was kind of, for me, a bombshell. And again, I don't know what Bonneville thinks of that, but I think that
I
they're,
assume they tried to adjust their offer in a way that encouraged it. I'd
Well,
say.
they're gonna have so many average megawatts in their contract high water mark. Whether you take it block, slice, or load following, I don't think Bonneville cares,
Okay,
because it's still the same megawatt hours in your high water mark.
okay.
Does that mean Snowpud's downsizing their operations? You said they had this entire procurement desk that worked on that, and now they're handing it over to Bonneville.
I don't know. My presumption would be,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, the answer may be no, because they may be going load following and then taking their Jackson and Youngs Creek and Hancock and Callaghan, which are four small hydro projects, and selling those in the open market through their desks. So I don't know. I don't know what their strategy is, and they may downsize a little bit, they may not. It just depends on what they're trying to do. And I'm not
Just an
close
interesting
enough to those
move,
folks.
yeah.
Yeah, all the folks that I knew are gone. You know, it's 10 years ago that I lived there. And they're not there anymore, so I couldn't call them and say, hey, what's going on?
Maybe they're on lease to BPA now.
Could be filling in the folks that left. So the second thing I wanted to talk to you guys about is on May 6th, we've got to file with Bonneville what flavor of contract we want. And you saw the presentation from Brian last time. Staff's recommendation is that we do load following. And that is still my recommendation. I don't need a resolution from you guys. I just need the head nod that, yeah, go do that, and I'll sign the contracts and get us going. Yeah,
Yeah, you have mine, yeah, but I mean, I'm also respecting the fact that, you know, Eddie, it would be good for Eddie, for you to, have a specific conversation, if you haven't already had it with Chris, to make sure that you feel comfortable with that, just so you're up to speed, it's, for me, it's a no-brainer, it really is, but because the, complexity of us managing and filling in the gaps is enormous. And with the amount of overhead that it would cause us to incur for, you know, potential savings, it's just not, it's not worth it. And I don't know if we'd ever get any potential savings, because we're in such a power tech market.
I think all other things being equal, everything that you just said is absolutely correct. If at the end of like 10 or 15 years, we hit a home run with geothermal, and suddenly we had a significant share of a big resource that was at or below market rates, that would be different. But if that were to happen today, I would recommend to the commission, no, we should still be load following for our load.
And just
And
sell it into the open market,
We should establish a trading desk to market the power.
sell it into the mid-sea market. Or something like that.
Well, right now it's bilateral, so you'd have to find a counterparty. As the market develops, you know, like 15 years from now, I absolutely expect the West will have an organized market that looks like the rest of the country. And you know, it'll be efficient, and you'll be able to buy and sell power into that market without having to locate a counterparty and all the other nonsense we got to go through today. So a power trading desk would look a lot different in a organized market than it is in a bilateral market. Bilateral market, you need to essentially have people that are, you know, half engineers, half lawyers, and they're working on all these things. In a multilateral market like an ISO, you essentially have somebody who tags the load, and that's what they do automatically, and then the market markets and clears on the margin any new resource you bring in. So it works out really well automatically, depending on how the market's structured, but that's a different conversation. And then, okay,
So what's your feeling?
Yeah, well, I would like to, discuss this in more detail with you, that'd be great, that you feel confident about it, is,
Yeah, two of us are, yeah.
when would we be, making this decision?
we need to submit our contract by May 6th.
May 6th. Oh, okay, well, yeah, I'll give you the head nod,
Okay,
yeah,
and then, just make some time, you know, late this week or next week or whenever it makes sense
Yeah,
for
for
you to
your
reach out.
check-in, yeah, just
We
tack
can
that
have
on
a
to it.
discussion, yeah.
okay. Yeah, next week.
Okay. So, you're wanting a head nod, you got head nods from all three of us?
Yep.
Okay,
So then I wanna, go in now to the strategic plan, if I may, for a moment.
okay, and are we gonna come back to operations report?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, no, this is just, I wanna include it in the GM
No,
report,
it's
because it
fine,
kinda
it's
makes sense here.
I just, curdled a little. So,
You were crushed?
Got left out.
yeah.
to work on my poker.
Are they skipping me?
No.
We'd skip a whole lot there, wouldn't
So, you know, we've entered into a contract with, Foster Mall, Longy, and, we had the initial, logistics meeting with them yesterday. So, heads up, we need to schedule something either the first or the third week of May for the first meeting with them, with you guys and me. And so what I propose to do, if you guys are okay with it, is I'll turn Joseph loose and we'll get a date and have a separate commission meeting. Cause I don't think, I mean, it's probably gonna be a couple hours. It would eat a regular meeting, completely, so,
Yeah, we need a separate
okay.
time for that.
The meeting that we had yesterday kind of walked through, the timing and everything else, and it looks like we're gonna be able to complete the entire strategic planning effort by October,
Wow.
which means it will be in time to include the results in the budgeting. So, you know, the news there was, I think, really, really good. One of the key elements is gonna be the mission, vision, values, and, Mall Foster is gonna look at the original, mission and value statements that we had in our last, strategic plan as kind of the starting point. I told them that we were working offline, and it turned out they know Karina.
Mhm.
So, you know, they know her very well. They said, well, look, if you guys are working on getting the values, you know, and a mission and value statement together with her, we'll just use that as input. So that kind of shifts into, I need to schedule another meeting with you guys and Karina sooner than we had planned. Just to tee up that issue and see if we can get it to where, we've got that resolution, and then that becomes Mall Foster's input on that part of the strategic plan. Does that sound okay?
Mhm.
All right. And then, in terms of, public involvement, you guys will hear from Mall Foster kind of the details, but, they've got a plan to do that. And my question is, does it fit your timeline? Is it what you want? And that, you know, fit my timeline. It was like, I was okay with that, but I said, hey, you know, the strategic plan is largely a creature of the commission, so the question is gonna be to them. And they know, Mall Foster knows that will be a question to you guys in the first meeting, so.
Yeah, and I mean, you set a target for when it's going to be done, but obviously, we'll do our best. And,
Well, and the question that Mall Foster had, which I think is the right question, is do you guys want, you know, a near final strategic plan that then you solicit public comment on? Or do you want public guidance on the plan earlier? And that's not a question you need to answer today. That's what they're gonna bring back.
I'll tell you, my preference is, just so my colleagues know, I prefer input up front as much as possible. Because the turning that into, organizational, strategy is kind of more our job.
Yeah,
Rather than like, we're going to do this, what do you think? I'd rather have them say, what do you want? And let us figure out how to meet what you want. That's kind of my thinking. But I'm open to others.
yeah, I don't mind public input along the process. I just think back to Robin attended when we had our first strategic planning update, and something he said really resonated with me, that he would like to see our strategic plan be aspirational, you know, and
And that really impacted our actions after
it
that.
did. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to have public comment in the crafting. What do you think?
Well, like I said, you guys think about this, and we don't need an answer now, but Mall Foster knows to ask the question in your first meeting. So I just want to give you a heads up, so you're thinking about it, and you'd be able to articulate what you wanted.
Okay.
That's the critical part, and, because they're just here to do whatever we tell them to do.
Yeah.
But they were asking good consultants, they asked the right question, you know, okay, we hear that you want public input, where do you want it? You want it in the upfront shaping, or do you wanna say, okay, here's what we're going to be in 20 years, does that make sense? And that's really the option. And the other thing was, one of the big questions was duration. And, Mall Foster was looking at the same way that a lot of these other places are, they're looking at relatively short, 3 to 5 year type things, and, or, kind of what do you want? And I said, well, it wouldn't make sense for us to pursue geothermal if we had a 3 to 5 year strategic plan. This wouldn't, because reasonably, you're looking at 12 to 15 years to get a plan online. So why would you even talk about something like that, if your strategic plan was shorter than that?
Yeah, for sure.
And then the other part that I because they're used to dealing with nonprofits and things like that. I said, look, a lot of our assets are 50 or 100 year assets. And you've got to have a plan for what to do at the end of the life of those assets. And
I mean, but we can have a long-term vision and short-term goals, right?
absolutely. Well,
Yeah,
and that's kind of where we settled,
Yeah.
was that I described it as milestones, that you've got a lighthouse out there, which is your vision, and then you've got milestones. And as you get closer to those milestones, they become things that you can measure, and strategic
Right.
objectives
Exactly.
and budget items, and, and then how to do it. So I think it's gonna be interesting and a lot of fun.
me too.
So at that point, I want to throw it open to questions. Eddie, I've got a ton more information from Eddie, I know you're interested in batteries. I wish you'd gone. You would have loved it, but I also understand you had to be at Energy Northwest, and that was I get it.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, more we could, well, go on that.
But before we leave, strategic
Yeah,
planning, I
yeah.
just wanna say that, Jamie, you have a lot of your own experience with your, organizational role. And, Mount Foster too. And so, I mean, if it makes sense for you to, help us make sure that we have that first,
Mhm.
get together is properly scoped and we hit the ground running.
Also, Mo Foster is gonna wanna meet with each of you individually.
Oh, good, okay.
So and I'm not sure about the timing on that, whether it's gonna be before or after the board meeting.
Well, I'm just saying, if we're okay with it, maybe letting Jamie take a little bit of a leadership role on making sure that we have to, speaking for the commission, what we're.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
That would actually make my life a lot easier.
That's what I'm thinking too.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, Jamie, so you're our nominal point of contact for the commission.
Great.
First, the whole strategic planning process.
Yeah, just for strategic plan. Yeah.
And batteries.
No.
No,
sir.
And fusion.
So it sounds like, but you were saying first or third week of May to have our first meeting with the
Yeah.
Foster Longy. So is that, I mean, we're talking May to October timeframe. Well, what are y'all thinking? I mean,
Sooner is better for me,
I did all my traveling already, so
so soon is good for you too.
it doesn't matter for me that much now anymore. So I'm pretty flexible, because I went to India, I went to Tucson.
Right.
So now I'm just gonna enjoy the Northwest.
I've got one little trip that I don't have to go, but I'm not sure Jody would come back if I didn't go with her. So we're gonna go visit the kids in Rhode Island. That's why I'm missing the next week, the next commission meeting.
Yeah, I went to Rhode Island last year.
I haven't been in 40 years. It'll be interesting, but get to see the kids. That'll be fun and hop around.
that's when?
It's I forget, May 7th through
Okay.
the 14th. That's
So
why
that,
first
then
week.
our next
third
meeting,
week.
yeah, okay, gotcha, so. Yeah, I'm fine either way with it, I guess,
Like I said, I'll turn Joseph loose and
Yeah.
coordinate with you guys and then
okay.
we'll figure it out that way. Because we gotta do public notice and, I mean, it'll be a regular meeting. It'll just be.
Speaking of which, if I may real quick, so you had said that before we have the meeting with Mal Foster, there needs to be a meeting to finalize the mission, correct? Was that my
No.
understanding?
Yeah, if I said that, I misspoke. It can be done in parallel. I
Concurrently.
mean, yeah, sooner is better, but, yeah, we're gonna have to have a separate, that's a good catch, Joseph. We're gonna have to have a separate, workshop with Karina.
Okay.
To work on
Right.
the mission, vision, values.
Right,
Could we,
so we wanna do them first, yeah.
could we book a
Well-
2-day period there? Like say that, I'll send out a general meeting or a general email here in a minute or in a little bit for that second week of May. And if we could block a couple of day period out and do it back to back, I think that could be beneficial.
I think that's a good thought, Joseph. I have not talked to Karina yet, so I don't know what her schedule looks like.
Ah,
So let me talk to her.
And I'm just saying, I have regular concerns, it's you two guys, you need to communicate, so I'll be flexible.
All right, we'll figure it out.
Get these two guys first, and then I'll adjust accordingly.
Yeah, I would just wanna make sure that we're, you know, allowing, setting aside enough time, and, you know, like. I think like, Joseph suggested back like Karina and then Mount Foster Lundy the next day, that could work. Team with, of course, you know, coordinating schedules, but I feel like doing both in the same day would be a lot, so.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I mean, well, part of it is you get that saturation going.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
We
burning.
would get hungry.
Glade,
Yeah.
well, we can do that.
We could bring food.
The other thing that I'm sensitive to, Jamie, I know in your business, this is kind of a critical time.
Yeah,
I don't wanna, you know, if we block 2 consecutive days, we just don't wanna.
I don't
mess
think
up.
I would be able to do 2 consecutive days.
Okay.
But I'll work with everybody.
But
make
like
sure
a
it's close
Wednesday and a
enough.
Friday maybe,
Could be, yeah,
Or 2 Fridays,
or 2 Fridays, yeah.
you know, just.
Yeah, a week apart, either way,
So I'm just, I'm not dictating anything, I'm just suggesting that, you know, everybody's got needs, we gotta coordinate that. and-
It could be a Friday,
We'll
Tuesday,
do it.
Friday, like
yeah,
on
Yeah,
either Friday on
Fridays.
with the commission in the middle, so kind of making some continuity.
yeah,
Maybe.
John.
yeah, I think Fridays usually work.
They
best for
do,
me.
Fridays were
Yeah.
good for me too.
Dr. Sitkin,
Thank you. I just heard the scheduling question and Chris, you were gone May 7th through when? When are you back? And are you back for the May 13th?
Let me just send out
Commission
an
meeting.
email to everybody. Let me send out an email when I get back to my desk, I'll look at my calendar, I'll just let everybody know, cause Kurt's gonna be in charge during that time, we've already talked about that. I just don't recall exactly what days.
Okay, I'm just thinking that I think it'd be good for you to be here when we have the water adjudication executive session. So if you're not here on May 13th, we may want to find a different date for that.
Well, let me find out where I am on May 13th, and that may be one that I can dial in for, you know,
Okay.
30 minutes or an hour from Rhode Island.
Okay.
And not
Okay.
not the whole meeting.
All right, very good.
Just,
We'll follow up.
yeah, let's figure that out.
is May 13th our commission meeting?
I have to look at my calendar, I don't remember.
Commission meeting would be early than that.
Second
It
Tuesday.
is because there's 5 Tuesdays in April.
May 13th was correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
Well, we have some scheduling to do, look at the.
Yeah.
well, we got a long time to our next commission meeting, in a couple weeks.
true, yeah. There's,
We'll get it sorted out between now and then.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Commissioner Yuri, did you have questions about storage, or did you want to go back on that?
I'd say at this point, we can keep moving. It's like getting to 9 o'clock here. We got one more business to get through, 2 presentations, so we can, but yeah, why don't we chat about it more next week?
Okay,
And you know I'm gonna go do that,
yeah, that's fine.
so, okay.
Yeah, I mean, it was a real learning experience for me. So I think how out of date it was. If there are no other questions, that's it for the jam report. Now we
Great.
can.
Do the operations report?
Oh,
Yes.
Yay.
So we were last, commission meeting, I declared an emergency for the VFD4, variable frequency drive 4. That's on site, it's getting wired in by the contractor. The delay will be getting the Rockwell, the manufacturer, to get scheduled for commissioning. But we're expecting probably maybe about 4 weeks from now, we should hopefully get commissioning for that. We started doing washdowns. Commissioner Yuri just barely missed seeing the basins fully empty last time around. But there'll be more opportunities, we'll do it again this year, maybe even twice more, so there's still chance for that. And not, wanted to get the hype up, but that's really all I have for current operations report.
I want to ask about a question, about the emergency declaration. So, when does that close out?
Well, it's just for this one particular item,
Mhm.
so it's not a broad emergency declaration. It was just to waive competitive bidding on this one item.
Right, I understand that. And so, does that mean that when the, one item is, replaced, then
Then
it
that
automatically
particular thing is
concludes?
extinguished.
I wondered about how emergency, we don't, as a commission, need to take any action to end an emergency declaration.
Generally not.
Okay.
Usually what happens is the general manager declares an emergency for a purpose. And, for instance, in a storm, in an electric utility, you would declare it so that you could go out and invoke mutual aid without having to bid it in a
Mhm.
contract.
Mhm.
And then you can bring all the other utilities in and fix whatever it is. In that case, the GM would usually declare the emergency over. And the reason would be that changes all the overtime rules in the labor contracts.
Right.
So, there's an example where you'd want to declare it and then declare it over. When it's just to purchase a single thing, generally that's not done. It's just declared an
Does our-
emergency and then the purchase is done and it's over.
Does our PUD have any other, open emergency declarations?
Don't believe so.
Okay, I remember there was something that happened a couple of months ago and.
There was
Yeah.
the three-way switch on our 115K line.
Yes.
We did
That's been repaired and that's done.
That's closed, okay.
And then we also declared an emergency for Frazzle, and I did undeclare that when we
Mhm,
moved out of
yeah, yeah.
Frazzle Ice. And that was comparable to a storm declaration.
Yeah.
No,
No, I'm just,
no, that's a good point. It's kind of a gray zone.
mhm.
Right.
Okay, that was my question.
I heard there was a turtle.
That is accurate. Apparently someone who was walking horses down here on the gravel road found an uninjured turtle and decided that it needed to make a trip to the Washington Humane Society. And then we got a call out of the blue and said, hey, can we bring back this turtle and bring it back to generally where it came from? And we were like, what turtle are you talking about? So that's why I can tell you the story that someone brought an
So
uninjured
the
turtle.
turtle just made a fun trip to the Humane Society and back.
Got checked
Yeah.
out by the vet tank.
Yeah.
Maybe got a vitamin shot.
And once the plastic bin was unlidded and opened, the turtle ran from the water.
I'm sure,
Like,
yeah,
who are these people?
yeah.
I didn't know they were that fast.
Yeah, they
It's
are.
pretty fast,
It was pretty quick.
yeah.
They're native.
So they told his
Yeah.
buddies about being abducted by aliens and, hopefully he's happy. Or she.
All right, moving on then. Thank you. Moving on to our old business updates, with the exception of strategic plan, which we've already covered, so broadband adjudication of return, so. Have at it.
Broadband?
Well, just a minor update, good morning, commissioners, but we're still working towards our May 16th deadline for BEAD round 2 and working with any provider in the community that wants to partner on an application, so more to come.
As far as, we have, beneficial communication and partnering with Pozo, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, and we're trying to kind of keeping the door open right down as late as we can to see if we can get any other partnerships.
For everybody.
One
And in
of,
fact, Andrew did reach out to the folks up in Calgary and invited them.
okay, cool.
So we'll see the issue is, will their business model accommodate to be?
I feel like they're not quite ready, they're not far enough along, I feel like, but, it certainly, has potential white space with, so there's a company out of Calgary that have technology based on white space that I've looked at. And, it has really good ability to go through trees. And Microsoft backed away from this technology because it had poor upload. But there's ways of modifying the technology to improve the upload, but, that's all we can say, but the reality is like, we need rubber meets the road, ready to go, cost effective, bang, out the door kind of things, and so BEAD needs that, obviously, so the timing may not be right for it. That technology, but it certainly has a potential future for any
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the commission and the broader public knew that, you know, we were aware of that as a potential provider, and Andrew had gone and reached out to them and, you know, proactively tried to get them engaged. Whether they engage or not is up to them. But we're wide open. Anybody wants to talk to us, we'll talk to them.
And I just want to say, I'm really excited about Pogazon being engaged on this. Because they're a relatively small player. There's a win in it for them. They're willing to invest in more than the average, let's just say they're better than the average bear as far as ISB contribution to the effort, and they're hungry to grow. And so, you know, when there's a small player, I mean, okay, I originally wanted that the PUD would retain, my opinion was to retain ownership, you know that, but and the reason was because to increase the potential competitiveness with kind of a permanent open access arrangement, but that's fine, that's not what's happening. But at the same motivation is there for helping a smaller player gain foothold traction, greater traction, because that creates a more competitive marketplace in Whatcom County, and that benefits all the end users of broadband. And hybridization also opens up the doors a little bit about who can be served, because you don't have to run a physical wire to every address. I'm not a fan of wireless, you all know that, but you know, everything is to a degree. Nothing should be religious kind of embrace of, you know, fiber by all means necessary. It's like what this does is it does open some doors for more competition, which is what ultimately will deliver a long-term improvement to level of service in this community. So just wanted to share that.
Anything else from Bud? John, do you want to talk about adjudication?
Certainly, we're in that stasis mode. We're still under the stay under the adjudication, so no motion has been filed. We are aware, at a meeting of the case committee last week, there have been about 100 or so plus or minus claims filed. I think there's confusion whether the deadline is May 2025 or May 26. It is May 26, so we have over a year to file a claim. As you can anticipate, ecology records and the county records of ownership with water right certificates may not always align, so ecology was comprehensive in who it served. And so there's a number of parties that have been named in as holding a water right and served in the action, but no longer own the property, or the property has been annexed into the city. It's my property, for instance, we've discussed before. And so are named in the suit, but would want out because they don't have a water right interest to assert. So college is working on a voluntary dismissal or stipulated dismissal process and some forms. They're asking input from the committee. That's proceeding. And the committee will be meeting with the judge in public about once a month to get input and provide information back on some of the rules and process. But that really is all that's happening at this time. And that's my update.
And our big kind of session is coming up in May.
Anticipate
so we're gonna hear
in May,
from-
and we'll be doing some coordination with their outside counsel this weekend next on that.
John, thank you for shepherding that, you know, and making that happen. It's definitely time for us to go over our team. And will that be an executive session, or will that be?
That will be an executive session. We'll be talking about what's being prepared for the claim filing and anticipation of the years to follow.
We're gonna have a long executive session in our next meeting.
I'll come prepared.
Snacks and food.
Got a few.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not on education.
Geothermal then?
I don't have anything new to report. We're still waiting on the results from Hero. Right? Have you heard anything new?
All I know is that Hero is about ready for their second update to the project, but I don't have a confirmed date yet.
Yeah, that's right. Mike from Nooksack, Mike Mullen, he reached out and he's looking for dates. And I think Sue Petty, didn't she say her first week in May was out or something?
Yes, yeah, she'll be out of town.
So I have an update, in terms of a request, so we've, done many presentations. On geothermal, I got a request from folks at the Lummi Nation to receive some kind of an update on this project. They're obviously excited about it, and just want to know more about it. So, I'd like to, connect you to the right people to schedule a
And we'd be
presentation.
happy to do that.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder, if any of you hear about a community group of any kind that wants to hear about what we're doing, not just geothermal, but specifically geothermal, we're happy to do it.
Yeah, I
Just
know.
let us know, we'll get a schedule.
Yeah.
Great.
I think that's it for geothermal.
And we covered
That's
strategic
it.
plans, so we're ready to move on to new business?
I think so.
Okay.
So the first one is, our new plan for rebuilding plant one. And I think, Kurt, you're gonna handle that? You're getting ready to share, take it away.
So this is my little show on our plant one rebuild. So obviously this is the biggest thing that we're working on in operations. This is what we spend our majority of our time thinking about and working on and trying to plan for, because this is really the biggest project that PUD's ever done. I'd say that this is gonna be one of the biggest projects that any of our project teams have ever worked on. So this is kind of just a high level look at where we are right now, kind of how we gotten there. And so I'll give you some pictures. There'll be some pictures along the way. So a lot of these 3D renderings were made by someone at Consor. I think mostly they were just kind of playing around. And so there may be some updates on some of these things later. That person's no longer there. We'll see about that. But what some people like to call it on the outside of this, the safety pins on our potential plant one. So actually, I don't think there would be that many, even if we did any of these. What we have in the current basement of plant one are some very large chains and motors to turn our flocculation devices. And they're literally, the chains are, an individual link is this big and this tall, and they're 40 foot wraps. And so part of our kind of, the architectural
Sure.
historical part is to get something on the exterior of our building from the actual current plant one. So that's what part of this rendering would be. And this would be from the northwest corner looking towards the southeast in this particular view.
Do they make those changes locally at
No.
Lister?
I think we were thinking about salvaging those.
Yeah, it's basically scrapped.
Right, oh, no, this would be scrapped from the current plant. These things are in use right now as we speak.
Oh, wow,
So,
that's cool.
so we would take one of those.
Maybe one in the lobby too, I don't know.
Maybe one in the lobby, maybe a small portion in the lobby too,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That's fun.
And an explanation of what are these things.
Right, a little
Why-
plaque,
why-
maybe some little pictures, we'll have Joseph work on that, getting us some stuff.
Mm.
So, a little bit of the history of how we got here. So the plant was, we've had discussed in other times, the plant was originally built in 1965. It was designed for a 30-year plant, and now we're clearly way past that. A lot of the ideas and the drivers for where we're at now was based on the 2019 capital improvement plan from REH2. So that's where we talked. There was a lot of research into what we would need for a potential new plant, what kind of things we would need for our transmission mains and different stuff like that. And that's what has driven a lot of this. And where we are now is deterioration and obsolescence. And so here's a picture. You can see on the right, there's our main incoming line into the current plant from the intake facility, and it's clearly rusting. There's lots of problems with that. And then on the left-hand side is our current switchgear inside the high head room with our high end pumps, which is obviously a very big no-no now. But there's no one who makes any switches like this anymore anywhere. If one of those switches was to open and not be able to close again, we would lose electrical for our high end pumps, so that's another problem that we have there. So some part of the plan development in 2021, that's when we had our original work order for the plan. With the company called Murray Smith, who's now Consor. And then in 2022 is when we kind of chose how we were gonna lay out the plan. There was three main design options at the time, and we decided to go with the one plant. So we could kind of keep everything together. That would also help us to get covers for our basins, so we would have a more resilient plan, especially during fragile ice time frames. In 2023, we had to kind of shift a little bit because that's when we found out that the Corps of Engineers and the City of Ferndale may be doing major work on the levee there, basically from the Main Street Bridge south to probably just a little bit past the city's water treatment plant. And there's, I mean, that's not our project. The last I heard, they're still thinking late 2028 or some time frame around there. But we haven't really heard any updates on that. But part of what's driving our design decisions is getting our work done and not having to deal with the levee. They just come afterwards and do their thing, and we don't have to worry about it. Last year, we started designing the utilidor and the utilidor access building. Here's another one of these renderings. So on the far right would be our existing intake facility. Obviously, that's sitting right there on the Nooksack River. And then everything to the left from the existing intake would all be new. That part in the middle would be underground. And then off to the left would be the utilidor access building above grade. One thing to note of this picture, Ferndale Road would actually be traversing between the intake and the utilidor building. So it's not the scale, but the Ferndale Road is going to be designed to go between those two
So
facilities.
those two blocks are much further apart.
Correct, yes.
And there's a road going between them. That's a very, at least speaking for myself, a very helpful graphic.
Okay.
It's the first time I've seen it all on one.
So you would figure that's probably several hundred feet actually between the two buildings. Because we're gonna have a setback from the road. The road, if provided the levee work does happen, the road's gonna come up, I think, somewhere between 4 and 5 feet. And so that's why we're trying to get ahead of that, so we're not touching the Corps' work afterwards, so. And so now we're getting more into the details of things. March of last year was our initial 30% and 30% plans. Typically, planning cycle is 30, 60, 90, and 100% plans is a standard planning cycle. The 30% plans was as a whole plant rebuild. And then in May of 2024, we kind of split it out a little bit where we were focusing more on the utilidor access building and utilidor. We were feeling pressured a little bit at that time, at least, by the core work, and so we wanted to kind of get ahead of that. August of last year, that's when we started pre-application permitting, working with the city.
There's a WO, could you explain?
Oh, sorry. So those are our work order amendments. So then the 2021 was when our initial work order with Murray Smith, now Consor. And so then we had to work amendment one, amendment two, and then additional amendments. And amendment 3 we just did last or this March or couple weeks. So August of last year, we started the permitting process, working with the city, the state. And then last November, we started working more with the actual sub-consultants, HVAC, electrical, mechanical, and started getting more detailed on that kind of stuff. Here's another one of those drawings. Down in the bottom right, you can see there's two pipes coming in the bottom right. That would be coming in from the utilidor building, hitting the sand traps and the chemical injection, starting from right, heading left, chemical injection and sand traps. Up on the top right is the control room. And then the water would flow from right to left in the basins, which is the center. And then at the top left, that's the high-end room, pumping up the water and pushing it out to the transmission main. And the empty box on the left is the electrical room. So these are a little bit old, but. So where we're at now, so again, like you just asked, Commissioner, work order amendment 3. And so that brought the whole design together. We're working on a full campus design. And now we're looking towards, this slide is actually looking towards the future of where we're heading. And the big benchmark that I'm looking forward to is in August. And that's when we're gonna have a 60% combined plans. And that's really gonna be a big deal. That's gonna really drive the next 5 years of all of our work. And so again, this is future work. So February of 26, the 90% is design, and then May. So about a year from now, we'll have 100% design.
And Kurt, those are drawings you can use to actually bid the construction. That's the intent.
The 100%.
Yes.
Yes. And so again, moving out in the future, then these dates are definitely getting a little more, way out there in the future. August next year, bid opening, November, beginning of construction. And then we're looking at September of 2028, completion of the utilidor and utilidor access building, as well as the transmission main leaving the plant. And then November of 2030, basically all the field work being complete. So.
And now then commencing operation.
Correct.
Yeah.
This one's a little bit, a little more detailed. Off to the right would be the Nooksack River. And then there's a small square, that would be a small blue square. That's the existing intake. The slightly bigger is the utilidor access building. Again, this is maybe a little bit more scale, but the blue square is not the scale. And then the largest one is the plant. And then the reason I marked the blue line heading to the what I'm looking at is the west to the left. That's the transmission main that will be replaced as part of this whole project, because during the levee work, they were talking about moving the whole road, closing the portion of Ferndale Road there's a corner that there's like an apartment building and stuff. They're talking about closing that portion of the road and changing it so it heads up 3rd Street.
Yeah.
Why would you cross the road twice?
Oh, you're talking about and what would be like C-117?
Yeah,
So we would be under the road. There's no road there at all right now.
but why would you wanna have the road going over it twice?
That's a good question that we can work on in design. This is older, but that's a very valid question.
Yeah, even later, if ever need,
Right, we're doing this to get in front of the road, right? So
but
in front of the road is in the.
maybe it's worth routing around the road.
It's a very valid point.
Yeah, I can.
The thing we don't know is on the west side of the road, what's there. It may not be possible to actually lay pipe there.
There's a lot of wetlands there.
Well, like just for another 5 minutes, I get to feel smart. So, let me out of this.
Yeah.
Come on.
It's a good question.
And there's probably a considered answer.
Yeah,
And to Kurt's point,
I'm sure.
this is still early.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
Is this even based on the last profile for the new road? That may have changed.
Yeah, because our engineers are working with the levee engineers, but our engineers aren't building the levee. They're not doing any of that work. All they can do is get information from them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then this is the big slide, the opinion of probable construction costs. And so on the utilidor, the UAV, the building and the transmission main, that's where we're kind of at the 60% design, and the low and high range for that design is the 29 million to 42 million. And then the water treatment plant, which was still back in the 30% design, they haven't updated that yet. That's not going to be until August. At that particular time, the range was 75 million to 123 million. with the, down at the bottom, the green accounting for the whole range. Again, with the 60% and 30% of the main plant from 105 million to 165 million.
Those are very big
Those are
numbers.
very large.
And I feel like there's a lot of responsibility in the poster your team is taking here.
Oh, yeah.
Meaning,
I agree.
meaning
You feel-
basically, well, I mean, I didn't mean like, I didn't mean it that way.
No,
I mean,
I
to be
don't
very
think-
responsible with the design effort in actually presenting ranges, because that's reality in the world we're living in.
Yeah, that's what this is.
Recognize, when we get to 100%, these ranges will be narrower.
Of course.
But not zero. And then who knows what you're gonna get for a bid?
I'm not gonna name it, but there's another large capital project going on in our county
Correct, yes.
where,
Which is this order of magnitude.
which is this matter, so we all know what we're talking about. And the numbers are. That's it.
Well,
And
they're 100 million to 250 million was last I saw.
okay,
So their spread is huge.
well, good, they're finally doing that, because that's new.
Makes our range feel tight, huh?
Yeah.
That's new, because until recently, it was just one number. Until very recently, it was very, very narrow band.
No, I got actually that before Tyler left the county.
Oh, really?
So it's been 6 months anyway.
Okay.
But, you know, they may have always had a range around that number and they didn't share.
They just presented the, yeah,
Yeah.
they printed the center point, yeah.
When we get to 100% design, how much will this narrow?
I would say they're gonna give us, I would say, well, the way that it works, when they give us the whole OPCC, as they call it. They say, these are the main tasks of building the plant. And then this is our number, and then there's an engineering standard that they use, and they say, minus 10% and plus 10%. And then they still provide a range
Yeah.
with a project this size.
Right.
But I would say based on what 20% is still gonna be the number. But then when we go out to bid, there's one number, and that's what the engineer's estimate number is, and then if we have to be within range for that, for the receive that bid. Okay.
Are we hiring any labor directly for this project? Or is it always embedded with delivery of subsystem?
I think we got the project manager.
Project manager. I mean, we have discussed and we've only discussed briefly the bringing on construction management. Third party just for assisting us during this.
Typically, they're called owner's engineers.
But we haven't looked at any specific firms. It was just something we're just kind of working through if we think that we will need some support. But other than that, I mean, I think to answer your first question, though, it's staff.
Well, I mean, that is a good thing in my perspective, because when you increase the amount that you're governing execution, you start incurring risk on project execution, where a vendor can come back and say, well, it's because you did this. And, this approach also prevents, something significant going wrong with the development effort when you just have project managers rather than, take on any of the implementation risk yourself. And I think you know a lot more about this than I do, so
Yeah, no, I mean, I gotta tell you, I have a very high degree of comfort with our staff and what they're doing. And I've been through dozens of these projects before, and, Kurt and Garrett have done a great job. I mean, nothing's broken. Just always recognize we can reduce risk, we can't eliminate it.
Right.
And there's always gonna be, I mean, good Lord. So we go and we find out that 100% of the concrete's gotta come from DC, and some odd tariff gets imposed at the end.
Mhm.
Something unforeseen. I know that's unlikely. I know that's unlikely.
Why is
It
that?
could happen.
I have a question, Kurt. So and I'm sure we've been over this before, but at the beginning of the project, you said that the, plant one, it had a 30-year lifespan, is that what you said? And we're far past that. What's the lifespan of the new plant one? 30 years?
Probably 30 years.
Actually, well, I think it's gonna be by component. So all of the moving stuff is gonna be about 30 years. The basins themselves may be built for 50 or 100 year. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for.
So we can retrofit different things to keep the plant hobbling along.
I think so, like the electronic controls, those are gonna be designed nominally, that all electronics is 20 years. And nobody will warranty it for more than that, but we're seeing out of these modern digital solid state devices, you get 40, 50 years sometimes. So what we're gonna be putting in is gonna be more reliable than what we had. But just as a for instance, the whole reason we had to declare an emergency on VFD4 was because it failed.
Yeah,
And we still need it to limp through until we get this.
but our financials are for the next 30 years too, right? Like the bonds that they were,
Bonds, I think, are 20.
were they 20s?
Yeah, I don't know if that changed, but I think they were 20.
I mean, to the degree it's possible, obviously it's good to build for a long life, but I'm not saying anything that the whole team doesn't know.
So that is my last slide.
Thanks, Kurt.
Ready?
What about the existing plant as far, once we get to 2030? Like we're building this new plant next to it,
Correct.
right? And then we'll begin the condemnation, destruction, reconstruction and all that, right?
Once the new plant's online, then we'll start demo of the old plant.
Okay, yeah, and are we? Is it, like, our bonds also include that, though, or final round of bonds will include the cost of?
The demolition is part of the overall project.
It's part of the overall project.
It's in that range.
Yeah,
It's included in the.
It's included in this,
Yeah,
yes.
right, okay.
Now, I don't think there's any extraordinary remediation involved in the project. So.
The main potential for that is the old substation.
Yeah.
There's the existing substation that's,
Transformer oil type stuff.
right, exactly. And that's the one it's basically 10 feet from Ferndale Road. And it's still being used, but once this new plant's online, that one will be taken out of the system as well.
So we're not expecting any extraordinary remediation. We know we've probably got some asbestos wrap and lead paint and that kind of stuff, and you've got to do that remediation before you demo. But I'm not aware of any site-specific remediation that's gonna happen outside of the core demolition of the building itself. If that happens, if there's some extraordinary remediation needed, that would probably be beyond the scope of this, and we have to talk about it in a couple of years. But it would be something we would discover, because we don't know about it today.
Yeah, due to the nature of the plant, we don't have a lot of asbestos wrapping or any, it would be more like lead paint and that kind of stuff, like maybe acoustic ceiling tiles perhaps, even though the ceiling's wood technically. But
Well, I thought I saw some linoleum in there.
maybe some
And
linoleum.
that's gonna be probably.
And it's not the whole plant, just.
No, just parts.
Just parts of it, so.
But before you move in there with wrecking balls and that kind of stuff, you gotta get rid of anything that can.
But
be
that's
friable.
not a large volume of the whole plant, so.
Great.
Any more questions? Great, thanks.
Thank you, Kurt.
Thank you. Oh, I guess, and it's silly, but it's just fun at the right time to talk about it, but we had in our last check-in, I talked about, there was a big conversation at the county about, labor agreements. And so, one of the things that, Chris and I spoke about, was what can we do in terms of encouraging to the degree that's reasonable, local sourcing and other desirable things from a community benefits perspective, without making it onerous. And so, whenever, I mean, we've already done procurement, but we're not building yet. We are building, but.
Well, it'll be when we go and advertise,
Yeah,
that's when your opportunity is for that kind of, activity.
but for the commission to kind of review and approve or, well, how we're, doing procurement, to encourage.
You know,
local
let me
sourcing.
pull out the procurement policy and send it to you guys so you can take a look at it, and then, we can have a discussion and, second meeting, maybe in my back.
When you say local, do you mean only Whatcom County or? do
Not
you-
only,
Okay,
encouraging things that are beneficial to our community.
okay. Cause I mean, when we did plant two, there, I've looked at records of contractors and there's a lot of the concrete was from Whatcom County plants. I mean, the company I worked for was out of Bellingham when I was working on plant two. So there was a lot of local companies underneath the general contractor that were from Whatcom County.
Yeah, continuing to encourage that kind of thing, because, I heard there's a lot of pressure for, out of town competition for our construction projects.
For something this big.
More recently, and it's not that I don't want us to, I mean, it's a balance, it's not like, absolutely. Local in all cases, but I just want the commission to be able to provide some input on
Let me
that.
get you a copy of our procurement policy, and the three of you can have a look at it, and then we can discuss it next time, and, we've got. Even if we go into June before we talk about that, we're still 11 months in front of having to put out a bid spec.
John has the same.
Hi, John.
If we want to get into a detailed discussion on this, I'd like to strategize about how we go about that discussion in advance of the meeting for some liability considerations.
So you'll work with Chris on it. Right,
Yes.
okay. Of course, that's fine.
Great. Thanks, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, the conversation that kind of become, conversation that kind of become contentious, and I don't want this to be contentious, I just want it to be like, well, what can we do quickly that support some of the same goals, but with zero drama? You know, just getting stuff on the table that supports.
Well, I think one thing that might help would be, Kurt, could I ask you to take a look at the breakdown of the subs on plant two? Just kind of, usually we did, and it may be, you look at it and you go, gosh, if we could just do that again, it'd be great,
Yeah, okay,
and that may be all that's needed.
yeah,
But you're talking about like using local, is that what you're saying? Cause
Yeah.
I feel like we've been over this and there was legal guidelines for choosing people.
and that's what John said.
Yeah, okay, yeah, cause we don't.
Yeah, but like
Stick money.
qualitatively,
Yeah.
the commission can influence the process, but we have to figure out whether we want to and and you know, what does that without reducing operational excellence, negatively impacting operational excellence. We want to have a positive benefit to the community, but we don't want to sacrifice. We're a utility. We don't want to do anything to sacrifice operational excellence.
Yeah, and I mean, from a project management perspective, it's all about scope, schedule, and budget. So, you know, you don't want to impact any of those things negatively
Yeah.
on a big project like this, because you change the schedule, you're gonna drive up your costs.
Right.
You know, you change the scope, you're gonna drive up your costs. That's the way these things always work.
Totally respect all that, yeah.
I don't wanna rush anybody, we've got a lot of meeting in a little bit of time.
I think next up is the annual financial report, and that should be in it.
Good morning, commissioners. It is our annual time to go over our previous year's financials and to get your okay to submit that to the SAO and our different bond agencies. And just to respond to that question previously, our bonds currently are 20-year bonds. So they will fall off before hopefully the life of most of our plant. So to start off with, nice pretty picture. This was the turbidity vault you might remember us talking about earlier this year. So somebody was lucky enough to capture a really pretty sunrise picture over the big hole
Yeah,
up by
wow.
plant 2.
What a good sunrise.
And if I was to do a headline for 2024, just a real high level recap, we ended well. Our revenues were slightly above budget and our expenses were under budget, and we ended in a good cash position for 2024. And going just a little bit deeper into the details, a lot of this is similar to what we saw last year. We are still having supply chain issues, they're not as shocking as they were last year because it's getting to be almost the new norm. But we have to keep an eye on this, especially with the new tariff issues. We're not quite sure how that's all going to play out. Alcoa still, we do not have a good customer pulling high levels of water there yet. They still are pulling some irrigation and a little bit of a potable, but not to the consumption levels they were. Ferndale Sub, this is a big, big win for us. In November 24, that went live and has been functioning since. If you have been around, you'll remember us talking about this a lot. This started in 2019. It was supposed to be, I believe, like a 18-month build. And with COVID and a lot of other things, it was a project that just struggled. But our team did well, followed through, and in November, it came online. Telecom, that's as you hear every commission meeting, that's more of a fluid project. And we are continuing to work with the port on that. Frazzle, we did have Frazzle mid-January 2024 for a couple days, and our team got through that. And then geothermal, that's the long-term one project that we're looking at. So this statement, a couple things on this. This is the same one that was in your memo. But it's not a standard profit loss statement. What it is it's more of a budget oriented. So what does that mean? That means that the non-cash lines have been removed. So your depreciation, your amortization have been taken out. And then also the pass-through for Phillips 66 for the electric utility, that has been taken out of the revenue and also the expenses. It's so big, it kind of dwarfs all the other variances. And because it's a pass-through, we can take that out. And this is a similar presentation or layout that we've had. So we'll look at the 2024, compare it to what it was the previous year, and then compare it to budget. Now, all these are high-level numbers. If you get into the annual report, those will be a little bit more detailed. And then if you have further questions, go ahead and email me, and I will answer them as best as I can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break that down into sections and just kind of tell you excuse me, any kind of high level variances or any kind of things that needed to be commented on. So the first one's the revenue. The revenue overall came in above 2023 and still above budget. So we did good. As far as consumption, while that's related to the revenue, it doesn't always correlate. So industrial water, the consumption was right about where we were 2023, just slightly above, but in both irrigation and Grandview, the consumption was under what we were the previous year. The miscellaneous revenue is higher than budgeted. And what falls into that is interest income. And then we also had some excess demand penalty fees that we charge. And how those come about are when our industrial customers pull water above their fixed operating level. So then they get an excess demand charge on that. But then down below, you can see our consumption at a high level of both the water and the power, just kind of in line with what it has been the last several years. Any questions on that slide?
Does the miscellaneous revenue also reflect the refinance or no?
No,
That's
the
interest
refi,
expense.
all that bond happened in February. So none of these
Gotcha.
numbers reflect that bond issue.
Next year, maybe.
Oh yeah, you'll see some differences next year. So talking about expenses, 3 high-level categories. The labor, there wasn't a lot of variance there, so I didn't split that one out much. Just for your information, we did add 4 new people in 2024. 2 were replacement and 2 were new positions. 2 operators and then Lisa and Joseph. So for the the O&M, that's split out down below, and the bulk of that variance, as it usually is in our extraordinary maintenance. Now, the extraordinary maintenance varies year to year depending on what kind of projects we have in there. And again, that is where the variance is for 2024. And then down below that, the admin expenses. There's two big ones there. The first one's the business development projects. And what that is that is stuff that would normally just flow through our expenses. But because it's a big project, we pull it out into its own little category so we can track it. And for example, and it is the big variance here, is our adjudication. Typically, that's just a legal expense, some engineering, but we pull that out so we can track what we're spending in adjudication. And in that business development, in 2024, we had budgeted roughly 500,000 and we ended up spending closer to 3. So that's causing a lot of that variance there. And then under fees, permits, and assessments, the big one in 2024 was our election cost. Now, our election cost continues to increase. I had budgeted 180,000 for 2024, and it came in at just over 300,000 with the primary and the general election, which is quite a bit. So,
Who's gonna go battle that one for us?
Well, we've already started.
Good.
The issue there is we have on a kind of per capita basis, the highest charges of any PUD, any county in the state.
That's something that, we should have a plaque.
Yeah.
At least. Not sure exactly what would be on it, sure, probably not be publicly viewable. But, yeah, no, we know that, we've talked to John a couple of times and we just haven't pushed on it yet, but it's not a good thing.
We should, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's just not a good thing at all. The bad news is the county may have a legal leg to stand on. And they may be just fine in terms of the law being able to do this to us, but it just doesn't feel right.
no, it does not. So our next slide is our business services. And what that is that's either work we do or we contract out and then we get reimbursed. So typically that's our grants. Sometimes, like in this one, down in the detail down below, we're doing feasibility studies or having feasibility studies done for a customer, for Alla Energy or Alta Gas. So the layout down below is a little different because that can change so much between years. You don't want to do the apple orange thing. So what I did is just what the income was on these and then the expenses and the variance in our budget. So typically the variance, so for example, Point Roberts broadband, the variance of there is right about $55,000. That's just a difference in timing. Whatcom County is reimbursing us on a quarterly schedule. So that last quarter hadn't been billed until January. So we will get income on that. Any questions on that slide?
Nope.
All right. So this is the piece that is a little bit more towards the balance sheet side of financial statements. And so these deal with capital that we deal with. So the debt service we didn't touch in 2024. So that's right in line with what we expected. The transfers for capital projects, I always want to make this distinction. This isn't what we paid for capital. This is the piece of our revenues and piece of our rates that we build in that goes towards current or future capital. So it's like, it's like your budget. You put in $200 a month for vacation. And so every month you stick that in a separate savings account. That would be what this is. It doesn't mean how much you spend on vacation. It's just what you've budgeted to go towards vacation. And then down below, I kind of pulled out the bigger capital projects we had last year. And then the biggest, or the one I did want to comment on is the Point Roberts broadband. We had initially set that up as a capital project where we would be owning the assets at the end of the project. And then, as you know, things have shifted and are a bit fluid. So that's going to be a port asset at the end of the day. So I'm moving this now into more of that business services. So it's a flow through of expenses and then revenue on that one. So next year that will be under the business services account. All right, so this actually was touched on previously. So earlier this year, we had declared an emergency on a 3-way switch pole. And in just in inspections, we noticed there were some hot spots that we were really concerned about. We shut down power to plant 1 on April 1st and did some other repairs, but then we had Batelco come in and do a dust and clean, refurbish on this pole and brought it back online, and it looks good. So that we were pretty relieved that we didn't have to replace that pole.
Now, guys, I think I'm gonna get a request to get one of those trucks. I'm sure they loved it. The 4-section boom, yeah.
And so when the plant 1 shuts down like that, obviously we notify our customers and let them know that, we're running on 1 plant and,
Yep, we let the fire district know, and then a couple other specific customers we tell as well.
We do, but we also have a generator that we use, a really large generator. So the plant was still in operation, but tentatively in operation. How about that?
running on backup power rather than off the grid.
Correct.
Yeah, and the
But we were
back-
also like tentative, we did shut down the plant because we replaced a couple valves that we can't replace during full operation, so while we had a chance, there was a couple valves we replaced as well. It was a busy day, every department had something to work on.
Yeah, not a good day for April Fool's jokes.
No, it wasn't, but it turned out pretty well.
All right.
Annette, thank you for always providing such detailed statements. It's nice to have the lines of the statement that are discussed in here. It makes it really easy to follow. I'm impressed that you not only have the numbers, but the stories behind the numbers. It's really helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you. So to get away from some of the just the straight numbers and just to give you a little bit of more graphics, one of the standard statements that you get in the annual report is the cash flow. And this is just where we are at cash wise, how much comes in, how much goes out, and just really high level. So in the upper left there, you can see it. This does include reserves and restricted cash. So down straight below that, I've split that out over the last couple of years. And you can see the red is what we have for operating and for capital projects. The blue is restricted, which usually means bond debt service reserves. And then the green is our self-imposed minimums that we keep and we budget towards from our financial policy. So you can see not all of it is available cash, but we are in a good position right now. And then in the upper right, our capital spending. As we get into the plant 1 rebuild, that's gonna change significantly. But you can see that 2021, that's where a lot of the Ferndale substation, that's where a lot of the cost was spent on that one. And then down below the yearly debt service, you can see we're just over 2.5 million annually for debt service. Starting in 2025 with our large bonds, this is going to go up quite a bit. So the debt service on our new bonds are roughly 5 million a year. So you can see that that graph's gonna increase quite a bit. And then I did want to pull out telecom because that is a project we're working on. And per SAO, I talked to them, and it's not an official utility until it has some operating revenue. So I've been kind of reluctant to make it its own utility. In the 2025 budget, I did break it out because I thought we were going to get operating revenue this year, and then everything shifted. So I'm still doing it like I have. So we're collecting it all in a telecom bucket. And then at the end of the year, I'm splitting it out between the different other utilities, the cost. But I wanted to show you in that bucket for 2024 what that looks like. So the revenue we got from 2024 was a Whatcom County reimbursement on the Point Roberts project. And then we had the labor and smaller other charges there. So that 234 in 2024, 234,000 was split between the other utilities. Any questions on that one?
Do we have a projection for what that will look like for 2025?
In our 2025 budget, yes. And like I said, I thought it was going to be its own utility or its own separate utility. So you can see that there. We are splitting out the labor in like legal and I mean, all those admin type expenses will still be covered, but we projected that we are going to start getting some operating revenue towards the end of the year, which is not going to happen now. But we do have, excuse me?
Sorry. The point it's important for us to understand, Annette, is that even though this exercise is largely grant funded,
We're still subsidizing it a little bit.
because of overhead,
Mhm.
and it's your time and some of Andrew's time.
Mostly Andrews, I think I'm pure overhead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and,
We're helping the port more now, and Andrew's been tracking his time, and we're invoicing the port. So, we should have more than just the grant revenue coming in, we should have some of that, because, you know, what we're trying to do is support the port so they're successful. And,
it strikes me that this is another justification for the, per BSL fee, is to recoup that over the life of the, whatever that is, 25 years, is what the commission adopted, to get that back over the life of the project. Something to think about.
at this point, we're gonna be transferring the asset and all the revenue and everything will go over to the port.
Mm-hmm.
So we can negotiate with the port about getting some of that back, whether.
Well, for the port too, because port spends a lot of overhead too, I mean, so, yeah.
Actually, no, they're not gonna spend much at all.
Well, I mean, before Gina left, I'm saying,
They spent money on Gina.
yeah,
And currently they're not.
Yeah.
So it's really Andrew who's doing the work for both
yeah,
organizations.
yeah. So they would have a shared interest potentially.
So looking forward, a lot of
Mm.
this is similar to that previous slide at the beginning about 2024, but we're continuing to be sensitive in the supply chain and lead times and costs. I was speaking with Kurt, and it's our new norm. But now that we have the tariff issue, there's a lot of uncertainty how that's all going to hit. In my purchasing groups, there's lots of talk about how to deal with tariffs that are kind of unknown in contracts. So that's an issue. Consultants and customers are having the same issues we are with kind of dealing in the unknown arena. We have unbudgeted costs. That's a standard thing. So we always have to watch that doesn't get too out of hand. Staffing. We do have an older workforce and it's slowly becoming younger, but that's something we have to watch for just because there's a lot of knowledge that leaves when people retire, as we know with Brian. And then now that the Ferndale sub's down or is working, the water treatment plant 1, as we all know, is now going to be our big focus for the next several years. And you'll hear a lot about that in financials and operations and all of that. All right, any questions on that?
The commission? No?
Nothing in particular, no. You provide a pretty detailed report.
Thank
Yeah, thank you
you.
for the report out. Now, do we need to take some action today?
Yes. We need your approval
Yeah.
in order for me to submit the annual report to the SAO.
So, we're not approving the presentation, it's the email that you sent us, the document that you sent us, that's the report, right, the draft report.
We need to move it to accept the financial report.
Yeah, but that wasn't, this presentation was a summary of the report.
Right.
And the report we all got as an email and reviewed. And it's also on the district's website.
Correct.
Okay, well, I will move to accept the district's 2024 annual financial report and authorize the submittal to the state auditor's office.
I will second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Annette.
Thanks, Annette.
She's really something.
Next, we have a discussion about an item with OxyCore, and I think John is gonna take lead on this discussion. Is that correct?
I am. Yes, all right. So if I could, I'm gonna share my screen here. I can get this all done correctly. Oops, oh, bear with me. I'm trying to get it right sized. So bear with me one more moment. Kind of working from my laptop, so I'm trying to. Okay, if you can. Oh boy.
I can see it.
Yep, I'm trying to get, there we go. So at the OxyCore out at the Northgate Industrial Park, the district has its water facilities with a building and some water facilities and lines and potable water plant that serves much of this area. We have a well protection zone, but by the agreements that had been worked out years ago, this is a joint building. Although we own all the facilities, the underlying owner has access, and we want to control access to this, protect our potable water well protection zone, as well as some additional area for additional storage and use for managing the water systems. So we have been negotiating for some time with OxyCore, and I think we did a presentation on this before for the commission. We've had the property appraised. We initially had looked at acquiring a piece from this spur down to this back area up to the cul-de-sac. That would be more expensive and less desirable for the seller because they lost frontage and they felt the property would be better for them to retain along the frontage of this private road. That was not necessary for us, as this isn't going to be developed and leased for some industrial uses. This is going to be our storage facility and water facilities. And so we have access, we would have access out through this easement in the buffer tract that exists and out to this private way at Northgate Way. We're presenting you with a purchase and sale agreement that was emailed over the weekend, and Joseph has this. We've been negotiating this. We came to agreement on Friday. Because the next commission meeting is 3 weeks away, we wanted to get this on the agenda. We have to create the parcel, so the purchase and sale agreement has conditions that this parcel has to be created, what we call proposed parcel 12. We would also acquire this buffer tract and this easement out to this area here. The county has not had the developer, the owner, OxyCore, has not done a binding site plan, specific binding site plan for roughly 10 years, and that was when they created parcel 11. So the underlying general binding site plan may have expired, and we are discussing with the county how to most effectively and efficiently create this parcel. And we are thinking that it may be through a lot line adjustment of that buffer tract to enlarge it to be this parcel 12. Through a lot line adjustment, we may have to do either a short plat or go back to the general and specific binding site plan process. That was discussed yesterday with the council for OxyCore. They're in agreement. They want to have this move as efficiently as possible. So we have a proposed motion for you to approve. There are some aspects of this, and let's see if we can share. I'm going to stop and then reshare the motion. So the motion that we would propose Joseph has handed out is to approve the purchase contract with OxyCore that we presented, authorize the general manager to approve said contract. We need you to authorize the earnest money provided in the purchase contract, which is a refundable $50,000. That'll be held by the title company. It's above the limit of the petty cash and above the general manager's spending authority. So we need your authorization of that. We need to have the final approval legal description that we think will go through the county. So that would be my office. And then we also have you delegate to the general manager the approval of the final contract, providing for that efficient process for creating the property as a legal lot of record, that short plat or lot line adjustment as I described. So that's before you. We've spent some time. We've had the property appraised. This is a resolution of that dollar value. It's slightly over the appraised value, but not significantly. I think it's less than what it would cost if we went through the condemnation process to accomplish this. So it's in the PUD's interest to acquire this at this price, and we're presenting this for your approval. I think we've discussed this a number of times before, but this is in public session for your final action to authorize proceeding.
That's a pretty wordy approval, but I'm willing to give it a shot.
I
No,
think we
I
have
know.
it here, and you can say as presented here on the screen. The public can read this. It's shared. Joseph can add this to the minutes as written.
I have one question. Do we have any other questions on this? No, I'll ask mine.
Go ahead.
So this $50,000, in terms of earnest money, is that standard?
It's
Having an earnest money,
It's-
having earnest money is standard. It seems a little high, but I'm not troubled by that because it's refundable and it's held with the title company. And until we get the short plat done and we approve that final, the short plat or lot line adjustment, until that's through and we've accepted everything, will not become non-refundable until the very end and when we're ready to close. So I was
Okay.
not concerned
Is it-
about that.
It has to get a title company then.
Right,
Yeah, okay, which
Yes.
is fine. I just think it's kind of funny.
it's a lot.
It's kind of funny because like we're a public agency, come on, you really think we're just messing around and that we're not for real, that we're, obviously, but anyway, whatever.
Well, usually it's a couple thousand. and you
Yeah.
just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we were expecting in the 5 to 10,000 range,
Yeah.
if anything.
Yeah.
And because of who we are, we're not going around.
It's just another reflection of our carnival party.
John, I have a
Exactly.
question.
I mean, we've been negotiating this since I got here in 22.
Yeah.
This has been very difficult.
What's the timeline for us getting the legal description of the property?
If we have to do a lot line adjustment, well, first of all, I would say, and I hope no one from Whatcom County is on the phone, but Whatcom County's notoriously
Sorry.
slow in its subdivision and land use approvals. It is not fast or efficient in the process. I think if we have to do a lot line adjustment, we're hoping to do a lot line adjustment, we're probably in the 90 to 120 day period. If we have to do a short plat or general binding site plan, we're probably 6 to 9 months.
Oh,
We
Okay.
have Adam Morrow's under contract. He's already prepared the applications for, he's at the the 5 yard line, so to speak, ready to file the applications, but we'll have to go through a pre-app and the typical county processes.
Okay.
Well, so I'm ready to make a motion to approve the purchase contract with OxyCore as stated.
As presented.
Yeah, as presented.
I'll second.
Uh,
The third.
Second.
Yeah, I have no objection, so
And as we say, as presented,
So-
as the motion is presented.
Yes, as the motion is presented.
Thank you.
in the motion presented in the,
Packet.
but in the.
Emailed, yes.
Presented.
Emailed addendum.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's one on the screen for you right now.
Right now, approve
Okay.
the,
Do we need to?
I'll go ahead and read it. Approve the purchase contract with OxyCorp, authorize the general manager to execute said contract and authorize the issuance of the earnest money provided for the purchase contract conditioned on legal counsel final approval of legal description of the property being acquired to include the 20-foot easement connecting the buffer tract with no way. And B, general manager approval of the final purchase contract, providing for the most efficient available process for creating the property as a legal lot of record.
So moved.
And seconded, and now we just need to, request all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Commission.
Thank you, commissioners.
Oh, and especially, thank you, John. Well, you've been working on this a long time.
I know, it's a long process.
Okay.
Lord have mercy.
Thanks for making it fun for us.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Moving along, so the next item on our agenda is to, oh, I guess that was it. That was the last item under new business. Is that right? No, there's D, resolution number 1, the Board of Commissioners of, regarding resolution 872.
I'll
So
take this one,
it's,
commissioners, if you don't mind.
Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So this one, what this is a bit of a house cleaning effort in that I was putting together, we have a spreadsheet that lists all our resolutions and the general, usually just says the resolution in the title so that we know what they were in regards to as a reference point for finding those resolutions. In doing that, I stumbled upon resolution number 872 and realized that the wording and the body of the resolution and in the title did not correctly reflect what we were attempting to, or what commission and staff were attempting to do with that resolution. So let me actually present my screen here, so that the public can see this, and I'll share screen too. Danny, you all can see that, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So what it was is in this resolution, we were asking for cancellation or canceling of these two warrants to Consor. The exhibit A is correct. It reflected in the resolution. So the county did approve the cancellation of those. Again, this is just purely a legal house cleaning matter for terminology. So I've adjusted in what was presented to you and presented in the packet, the warrant numbers in the title, and adjusted the tenses in the resolution to reflect multiple warrants referenced in Exhibit A, and then everything else pretty much reads the same, but I wanted to make sure that what you guys are approving is the corrected text of this resolution, and within the body of the resolution that I gave you, to supersede this one and just correct it for legal purposes, if that makes sense at all.
Joseph, all that to say that the warrant number in the title is wrong, is that correct?
Literally pretty much is correcting the
Yeah,
tense
okay.
and correcting the resolution so that it reads properly.
Great,
Okay.
thank you.
I move to approve resolution
We're not gonna have
eight
a chance to
seventy-seven.
debate on
You move to correct and supersede the,
I move to approve resolution number 877 superseding resolution 872.
I second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye,
Aye.
Thank you, Joseph.
thank you, Joseph.
Let me unshare.
Okay, that concludes new business. So let's move on to commissioner reports.
Cool. I just have, well, I guess a couple things. I will be attending online the meetings this week. Specifically the board of directors meeting on Friday, because there's a vote to take.
Yeah, on the new secretary and all.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so let me know if you guys have opinions, I guess, since I'll be.
Well, it's too late at this point, if,
Yeah, wait, yeah, how does that work? If we-
yeah, I mean, like, so. I mean, if we wanna have a special conversation on, between now, special meeting between now and Friday to give the commission's input
I mean,
on that.
how does that work? Because it doesn't affect the business of this office.
Right,
It's
it's an
specifically
association.
an association.
Yeah, so.
But it's your voting.
Yeah.
What happens here, when you guys assign roles to PUDA at the beginning of the year, you're essentially delegating to that individual to
Yes,
go ahead
well,
to speak on behalf of the commission. So
sure.
you don't need any other arrangement for that.
Yeah,
And I think Jamie's just giving you the heads up.
Don't worry, I'll choose nicely.
okay.
I think they're all good candidates.
Yeah, I think I trust Jamie
Yeah,
to
me too.
represent us on that, so.
The only other thing is Lisa's gonna, she's already laughing. So the 4th of July float, we had talked about having a float and really excited about a float.
Mhm.
Lisa won't let me drive the truck, which, seems unfair, but I'll go with it. Where are we at on that? Do you need some commissioner help? You need
Yeah, absolutely.
somebody to staple streamers to a trailer?
I'm gonna defer to Lisa to give you an update on where we are.
And I guess we need to just have a like head nod that commission does want that.
I think that's more,
Yeah.
mostly what we need. Commissioner Arnett asked me about the status of it, and I think, we briefly discussed it. I know there was something you did last year before I was here. I think we just need sort of some direction as to, what you want. Last year, we had just a truck with a couple of commissioners in it. I can rein it in and do just that. Or we can build a float,
And
but
we want number one.
yeah, and Jamie and I do.
We have a history.
We do have a history of building floats that have
Winning floats.
winning floats in the
Just
4th of
saying.
July parade, in Blaine. So, I can dial it back, however, and just have a truck with, bunting on it.
Bunting, yeah, truck with bunting.
That's what Chris, when Chris asked me to be in charge of.
Wait a
it,
second,
I'm not
just
sure-
bunting?
I know, that's what I said. I was like,
No, we need like a forest scene with like fish jumping through the water, and like
Have you seen this?
maybe some transmission lines and.
There's this salmon in my office.
I've seen
for
it.
just such a purpose. So I do have a vision and a plan, but it depends on what the commission wants.
I'm absolutely a willing volunteer.
All
So,
right, let's do it.
yeah,
Not your thing. that's
Well, I was
okay.
just,
He's like, what is happening?
No, it's more like, yeah, it's news to me that we're doing this project, so,
What is happening right now?
no, I think that all sounds well and good. I'm not sure how much I'll contribute,
That's okay.
but
Just
I
your support
would,
is enough.
I'll nod off on it and then if I could ride on the float too, I mean, I would be
yeah.
interested.
And I think that Chris, your idea of having a erupting volcano is a bad one.
Yeah.
No, geez.
That was over the top, yeah.
He had several ideas.
Oh my gosh, a volcano with like bubbles coming out of it, though.
We're thinking a
Part of our
geothermal plant on the
nature.
side, constantly erupting.
Bad idea.
Okay, he was kicked
So-
off the planet.
Yeah. Which is why I defer until we decide.
No, I'm
Just think about
envisioning
it.
more of I do have a current collection of, fairly large collection of paper for a large, mortar, not paper mache, but mortar mache Mount Baker. That will be part of the,
Oh my
Fort
God.
Curtis is like, oh my gosh.
You know
Okay.
what, Lisa, that
Yeah.
brings me joy.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm excited.
So, with a river and possibly some kayaks.
Wow,
As GM, I'm kind of like head in hands going, no, please, let's not not too big, okay?
No, wait, hey,
I promised there would be no rose petals.
And we'll make the clearances on all the necessary bridges.
I just wanna tell
Yeah.
you, we're number one, we will be number one. We will be.
is there a?
Surprise. You
There's
get
a trophy.
You get a trophy, and
We have 2 of them.
We need to
Yeah.
have a trophy case, then.
Then we're gonna have to build one, yeah.
we've only entered twice and we've won first place twice, so just, yeah.
Oh, we have one.
No,
No, not
Lisa
you.
and I have.
Oh.
Yeah.
You and I.
You do that. Okay.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Okay,
not the collective we yet.
yes,
Yeah,
okay, well, I think it's a great opportunity to engage with the public and,
Build a mountain.
Yeah.
build our brand. No, that's, I think that, yeah, symbolically having a mountain salmon, those are good,
Yeah, good stuff.
good to do.
Awesome,
Yeah.
now we're committed.
all right, let's go.
You said it in public.
Okay,
It's over.
it's happening.
That's it from me.
We're next.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna be traveling to the WAPUDA annual conference this year as well, so, yeah, looking forward to that. I did go to Energy Northwest, first trip out to Tri-Cities last week, and had the privilege of touring the Columbia Generating Station the first time. It's in a planned outage that just started for the next couple months while they do a lot of general maintenance work. So we were able to see more than was otherwise be usually open with a group of other commissioners, and yeah, it was just, I mean, it was just a cool experience. Overall, like just very notable how, I mean, for, yeah, 10, more than a gigawatt, 1.1 gigawatt, load and 10% of the state's power supply, how it's all just contained in a pretty relatively small plant. And seeing the Hanford Reach and in general, I could see a lot of opportunity for expanding more utility scale solar in that space, looking at it. I mean, we could add millions of panels out there, probably economically, in the future, and those kind of things, exploring more kinds of alternative energy projects. Definitely an interest, found some, there's some interest from other members of the board in that. Currently, of course, the focus is on, one, expanding capacity of the existing nuclear plant, and then two, our new nuclear project, which is they're currently, we're getting closer to coming up with a new official trade name for, as you know, right now it's just called New Nuclear LLC is the designation. But so we're
Brainstorming names.
if anyone wants to come up with a great name for the project, they're still taking suggestions. I think a little longer, but yeah, so that would involve small modular nuclear reactors, facility adjacent to CGS in the same area, as well as potentially other locations. So that there's a lot of talk about that. There's still, I mean, yeah, it's very, I mean, I think there's definitely a general consensus on the board about like everyone's very much for moving forward, and there's still some outstanding questions about what the ultimate price tag is going to be. But because of the interest in partnership with Amazon to buy the power and willing to saddle more of the risk to a pretty wide cost estimate range, is what makes the whole thing, I think, viable to try to be on more on the cutting edge of the next generation of nuclear reactors in the U.S. And that's something where the more I'm learning, more I'm getting assurance about overall the physical safety and responsibility of doing the project from the financial perspective. I think that's where it seems like there's still kind of a lot of unknowns, but this is going to be the approval of the new project or moving forward with actually then moving into stages of design and all that is going to be require preliminary conditional approval by each of the PUDs on the board of each of the organizations on the board of Energy Northwest. So we would have to take a vote as a commission, and then for the final approval. There's the next quarterly meeting is going to be in July. I think we'll be closer on, and probably don't have, again, we're always kind of running the clock on our meeting here, so I don't know if we want to discuss that much more, but I would love to make some time for it. And it's something that exists, outside of our, directly purview of our commission. We're just one vote on this large board. But
it should be a mindful vote, yeah.
Because we'll share the responsibility, whatever the outcome is, so. That's.
And basically it's a vote to express our support for proceeding on the SMR build out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Has a vote been taken on the relicensing of Columbia, and did staff make a formal recommendation of which pathway they're recommending, which is relicensing with a extended power upgrade, or just relicensing? Have they made a recommendation, and did the board vote on that yet?
I think
This is basically adding capacity to the existing plant,
Right.
160 something megawatts.
I think that was voted on.
Yeah, my recollection is that they took care of that either late in 23 or early in 24.
Okay.
So it's been a little while, but they've already filed with the NRC.
And are they going with the extended power upgrade? Is that
Yes.
official? Okay.
I believe that is my recollection.
Because they're presenting the two AB, and they were about to make a decision at the last energy committee meeting. So it must have just happened, because they were literally
We
presenting.
did approve the upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With an extended power upgrade, okay.
Yeah.
Which is, to me, that was a no-brainer.
Yeah, uh. Yeah, I think it's like a, it's like a 10%, capacity expansion, it's,
And a
significant.
20-year license extension.
Yeah, and overall, the rates, it's pretty impressive, the rates have gone down significantly in the last decade. They rose, I think last year they did rise a little bit from, now it's at like 36 a megawatt hour, but down from over 50 in like, less than 10 years ago, so, although I think that they're gonna be going back up now with the, and then for the next year, we're gonna see something maybe more like 45, with the, expansion and covering that, but yeah, the power gets sold to BPA and then comes through us indirectly, or vis-a-vis, into our customers, so, yeah, also was able to just meet some of and hear from, the team of, I think there's nine people, working on the SMR project, seems like a, really good team they put together. Was able to connect with the public affairs staff, meet the new legislative affairs person who's working both in Olympia and in Washington DC, on that note, we'll say that, so we are in the last week of the legislative session, and we're pretty much down to just concurrence of bills that have already passed both the House and Senate, and the final, approval of the final budget, and a few outstanding bills necessary to implement the budget. And some of the more controversial ones that we discussed previously, environmental justice bill, and then that was just kind of left hanging, didn't get to a floor vote. The bill relating to transmission and establishing a new state office for planning transmission. That did not come to a vote on the floor.
Does that have fiscal impacts, I'm assuming?
It did, but I don't think it's not getting passed this year. So it sounds like it's, yeah. And which is, I think, for the best, given just how many outstanding issues there were with it, where, this was its first session, and, it seems like there's a lot that could be worked out in the interim, before the next session or subsequent to, come up with a bill that's gonna actually, that everyone who's a, key stakeholder can feel comfortable with and support, right? And there's an opportunity to do that, because there is, general agreement about the goal and, the need to address the issue, so, but just how to do it, so, but there's, I think a number of other bills on the WAPUDA agenda did make it through. There's, I don't know what else we need to discuss here today, but, I feel like I always feel like I'm forgetting something I should tell you all, but, yeah, I think that's probably all from the report. You wanna go?
Yeah, I'll go. So the main thing, that planning commission meeting is this Thursday. It was gonna be last Thursday. Now it's this Thursday, where I'll speak on behalf of the commission and say that we support going to 230 volts, KV, not volts, KV. So, for transmission infrastructure, going from 115, which is what the current, county code limits, right, to allow to go up to 230. So just FYI, there's that, of course, I'm attending meetings this week, and,
Are you on in person, or are you?
In person, yeah.
Zoom in?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Eddie and I are riding down together, I'm coming back by train. Then, also, planning to attend PPC, and there's an EDI meeting coming up, so a lot of meetings happening in the next month, my standard issue meetings, so. The only non-standard one, is this meeting with, is the planning commission, and then, I guess what I should mention is that the thermal energy conversation is probably gonna happen next week as well, so. But I'll know when it happens, so.
You mean the
With the Cascade Natural Gas I brought up in the last meeting. Yeah.
okay,
That's it for me.
great.
So, So in order for the commission, the commissioner update discussion, let's move on to public comment. You have something else?
Well, I guess when you get to talk to CC, Sanji, if you be interested in hearing about that.
Yeah, we'll absolutely share
Yeah.
that.
But yeah, I think, we can move to public comment.
Hi,
I'd like to see here as a private citizen. I want to give a kudos to Annette for a great financial report. I do think it would be important in the future with a 585% variance to break that out a little bit more. That's a pretty big variance. And that was the big reason that there was as much surplus as there was, at least in income over real income versus expected. And then just going forward, something that I've shouldn't say never, something that I haven't seen, and I don't know that government agencies do, but might consider doing, is comparing their budget assumptions to their accuracy versus real numbers. So one, the PUD does a really good job. You'll notice that the only thing that was off a little bit was you were over on your income for your it was the interest, and then also it was the penalties for overdrawing of water. And so something that other government agencies might learn is, or benefit from, is what assumptions are you using and how are you getting so accurate? Because other government agencies typically aren't as accurate on their budgets. And so I think that's something that this government agency with its accuracy might be able to lend to other government agencies. Now, I realize there are much more, this is a very narrow viewpoint that this organization has compared to others, but those assumptions are important and they carry across, and I think that's something that are you getting more? And the other thing to look at is, are you getting more accurate on your budgets versus actuals each year, or are you getting less accurate over time? Thanks.
Thank you, Todd.
Thanks, Todd. They can't have our Annette, though.
Any comments online? It looks like no.
My hands.
Nice. Okay, so that concludes public comment. We are not having an executive session. Is there anything else for the good of the order?
I have nothing else for the commission.
No? No. All right, well, thank you all. Thanks for coming. Our next meeting is in now approximately 3 weeks, and hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.
I think I'll go play in some dirt, maybe.